The sequel to one of the best superhero games is finally here. Marvel's Spider-Man 2, the second entry to Insomniac Games' amazing take on what could be the best video game iteration of everyone's favorite web-slinger, is finally released. Will this second installment live up to the first in terms of gameplay and story? Join us here at Game8 as we dive, or in this case, swing into whether this sequel lives up to the Spider-Man name. This is a video adaptation of our review article of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 at Game8. The link is in the description below. The story takes place months after the end of Spider-Man Miles Morales. Both Peter Parker and Miles Morales are now accustomed to fighting side by side with each other. Since both of the Spider-Men have their backstories well established by their respective games, the sequel instead shows the story of the men behind the mask, giving us a look into both the action and the hardships that come with it. Both Peter and Miles struggle to find the balance they desperately need as they take it upon themselves to always be there for the citizens of New York. They must become the best Spider-Man they can be while being able to keep themselves grounded in the process. Work-life balance, am I right?
I'm so getting fired.
Early on in the game, we're introduced to all the major characters found in the story. From Miles' best friend and tech hacker support for the two Spider-Men, Ganke Lee, to newer faces like Peter's best friend, Harry Osborn, who had just been cured of the disease that had been plaguing him for the past few years. The relationship of Peter and Harry is especially explored in the sequel, and plays a huge role in the overarching storyline of the game. Now, what is a Spider-Man story without its villains? The main villains in this Spidey story are Kraven the Hunter and Venom. Kraven is the overarching antagonist of the game, invading New York in search of his greatest hunt.
The great hunt begins.
This leads him to kidnapping various Spider-Man villains, which the two Spider-Men must stop from happening. While we don't want to say too much about Venom, in our opinion, this iteration of the large symbiote monster may be one of the best depictions in recent memory. It may be fair to say that Insomniac has been able to perfect the Spider-Man formula, and even go as far as to prove that even with all the older Spider-Man games out there, they're the ones that have been able to capture Spider-Man as a whole to its fullest potential. In the end though, not everything is perfect, as some segments of the story feel jarring at times, and the campaign may be a little too short. They also could have added a little more context for the rest of the cast.
What the hell happened here?
Marvel's Spider-Man 2's gameplay is very similar to the first installment, but with some added much needed improvements to make the overall experience more enjoyable. Which already sounds like a difficult task to do considering the first game's gameplay was already a great experience in itself. Rather than a tack ton of new extra mechanics without much thought, the devs decided to focus on improving the mechanics from the first game. The game feels like a culmination of the gameplay of both the first Marvel Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales, with this game getting some of the best features from both. Unlike the previous games where you only control either Peter or Miles in their respective games, Spider-Man 2 allows us to take control of both Spideys, with each of them having their own strengths and abilities. The sequel forgoes the previous title's use of multiple gadgets and instead mixes in some abilities to the Spider-Man's arsenal, as well as a new skill tree for each of the Spider-Men. The skill tree is divided into 3 sections, one for Peter's abilities, one for Miles, and a third one for some shared abilities. All of these skills allow you to unlock more movesets for the two Spider-Men and make them a lot tougher and more efficient in a fight. There are also other tabs in the menu that allow you to upgrade your gadgets and suit tech by spending the resources you gain as you play through the game. These upgrades allow you to gain even more advantages during a fight by increasing your overall damage or buffing up your health. Meanwhile, the gadget upgrades give you even more of an edge in battle, as upgrading these will make dispatching large groups of enemies a lot easier.
You're prolonging the inevitable!
Devs did a great job with making each of the Spider-Man's abilities feel unique to each other, encouraging the player to actually want to switch between the two. If some sick freestyle combat is what you want, Miles should be your go-to, as his movements and finishers almost feel like a dance. Miles' gameplay consists of marking out enemies and using his powers to deal massive damage to those within his range. Players who have played the Miles Morales story of the previous game will definitely feel accustomed to his gameplay, especially with regards to his Venom powers. From the Venom Punch to the Venom Slam, all of it will feel familiar to players of the previous title. Then as you progress through the game, they'll start to introduce new abilities for him in the form of lightning powers, These powerful abilities allow Miles to make quick work of his enemies, like by using Chain Lightning to target multiple opponents, or allowing Miles to quickly close in on enemies with Thunderburst. These newly added abilities keep the gameplay fresh and fun, especially for players coming in from the previous game. Now, out of all the new additions to the game, the OG Spider-Man, Peter Parker, gets most of the new stuff. To compensate for his lack of abilities he had in the previous entry, the sequel gives Peter some new moves in the form of his spider arms. Peter can use the spider arms to unleash a flurry of slashes onto an enemy to deal large amounts of damage, or he can use them to fire out webs that electrocute multiple targets at once. Compared to Miles, Peter's combat feels like a powerhouse type gameplay, with his abilities focusing on dealing more raw damage to enemies to make short work of them. Then, later in the game, he unlocks even more abilities in the way of symbiote powers.
Oh, this feels good.
This makes Peter an unstoppable force to be reckoned with, and makes his moveset a lot more brutal. He can use these powers to punch enemies into walls, or go for a more brutal move of picking up multiple enemies and slamming them to the ground. It's honestly great seeing Peter get a huge update on his powers, as while we were playing through Miles Morales, we were wondering how they would manage to set apart Peter's gameplay from that of Miles. By giving Peter these new spider arms and symbiote powers, he appeals to the player who just wants to resolve issues with sheer power than with style. Another thing making a return in the sequel are parts where you get to control MJ in certain story missions. Now, before you get uppity about how painfully boring these sections were in the previous game, this time around she actually knows how to defend herself. Her gameplay sections provide a sort of change of pace to the high-octane action of playing as the two Spider-Men, and instead focuses on a more stealth-type gameplay like it was in the first game. But MJ this time around is equipped with a stun gun that can easily incapacitate enemies when she gets a drop on them. This makes MJ look a lot less of a damsel in distress and more like a capable person able to solve problems on her own. These sections are actually fun this time around, but at times it does feel like MJ has a bit too much plot armor. Seeing Mary Jane withstand hits that could possibly gravely injure someone is pretty jarring. These incidents include, but are not limited to, getting shot by an arrow through the shoulder, and surviving after skidding and rolling out of a motorcycle at full speed. The thought of a civilian armed with a taser sneaking past highly trained hunters and single-handedly taking them down is quite crazy to say the least. Now let's go back to focusing on the two Spideys. Exploration also gets some much needed improvements by introducing new areas and new ways to get around the city. Unlike the previous game, which is only set in the confines of the city of Manhattan, the game opens up more areas of the Big Apple, with places like Brooklyn and Queens all open for exploration. This is where the new traversal mechanics come into play, with one of the game's skill trees focusing entirely on swinging and traversal. Unlocking these skills opens up new ways to improve your web slinging, from being able to do a loop to gain some much needed speed to the more essential skills of boosting your Spider-Man forward or upward. One of the new traversal options introduced in this game is the web wings. These are gliders that allow the Spider-Man to glide through the city skies, which then allows you to travel large distances. There are even some wind tunnels found in the city of New York to help you get around quicker. All these make swinging around the city a blast to experience, and it honestly makes us not want to use the game's fast travel system. Oh, and speaking of the fast travel system, Insomniac must have taken a page from the Ratchet & Clank team because the loading times for fast travel in this game is practically non-existent. Once you unlock fast travel to a certain area of the city, all you have to do is a simple long button push and you're instantly transported to that side of the map. Even if you are coming from the other side of the map, it's all seamless and really amazing with how fast the game loads up a large chunk of the area. Like the previous games, Spider-Man 2 offers up a multitude of different side activities scattered throughout the map. From sneaking into a heavily guarded hunter base to more mundane tasks such as taking pictures around the city, it definitely offers a lot to do during the downtimes in between the main story missions. The main gameplay loop consists of the usual swinging around the map and then stopping crime whenever it pops up. You know, the daily life of your friendly neighborhood Spidey. The gameplay loop itself is quite addicting, as mopping up bad guys as your favorite Spider-Man has always been satisfying. The visuals of Spider-Man 2 is one of the best we've seen in an open world game. Even though you'll be mostly swinging and gliding across the city at high speeds, if you take the time to stick to the ground and walk among the people, you will find that the city of New York and its surrounding areas all feel like it's bustling with life and atmosphere. Insomniac Games managed to really capture the essence of the city that never sleeps, with all the environments being masterfully detailed, down to the NPC pedestrians walking about around the city. As you progress through the story, there will be some changes to the city around you. A great example of this is the intro boss where you battle Sandman. After the fight, you will notice large piles of sand scattered across the city streets as you swing by. Then, as the story progresses, you will then notice that the streets are looking a lot cleaner than they were before. It's small details like this that makes us appreciate the attention to detail that the devs put into this game. Speaking of details, another great thing about the visuals are the character designs of the major characters. Of particular note are the main villains, Kraven the Hunter and Venom. Each of them gives off an air of, I don't want to mess with this guy. And that just speaks to how well they're designed. Let's not forget the two lovable spiders, as they'd also gotten a lot of love from the visual department. The game features over 70 suits for Peter and Miles to wear, some being references to some well-known Spider-Man suits from other media, with some original to the game. These suits are unlocked by leveling up or by completing side stories found throughout the city. The suits look great, and some of them even allow you to choose up to 4 different color schemes to change into. There are many suits to really customize the way your Spider-Man look, and you'll definitely find a suit that you'll favor more than others. We certainly did in our playthrough. The sound design overall is well made and polished. The combat sounds feel powerful and have a lot of impact. The sound of powers get a huge mention from us, as it really amplifies how powerful these abilities are. We notice this especially when using Miles' lightning powers, as the impact and thundering sounds coming from his abilities feel like they would pack a punch. The voice acting is also amazing. The voice actors of both Spider-Man really give it their all, and you can get a feel for their acting chops, especially during some of the more dialogue-heavy scenes in the game.
He's mine.
You sure? He's got big teeth.
So do I.
We'd also like to give big props to Yuri Lowenthal's portrayal of the OG Spider-Man, as he does a great job with really bringing the web-slinger to life. He really nailed it, and captured what makes Spider-Man great, even down to his quippy Spidey one-liners.
And Parker does it all with the home run bunt. Never in all my years have I seen one man accomplish so much by doing so little. What a season! What a season!
He also gets to show his range later in the game, when Peter gets a hold of the symbiote suit and starts to get a bit on the edgy side. It's a great rendition of one of comic book's most popular characters, and we're looking forward to more future portrayals of him as Spider-Man. That being said, with the focus on improving what they had in the previous games of the series, the game didn't really break new ground. The game also features quite a few visual and audio bugs here and there, from NPCs walking through walls to cutscenes having their audio delayed.
Miles?
I'm sorry.
There was even a moment where we fell out of the world. Yep, that just happened. Yes, the game has quite a few bugs in it, but honestly, none of them were game-breaking enough to detract from how much fun the rest of the game was. It's still a really well-made game, one that is a must-play, especially for fans of the adventures of the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a great follow-up to an already amazing game. With a bigger focus on characters and developing them, Insomniac Games shows us that a Spider-Man video game legacy is safely in their hands. We here at Game8 are giving Marvel's Spider-Man 2 an 8.8 out of 10. The game is quite a relatively short experience compared to many other open-world games, with us being able to get the Platinum Trophy in less than 25 hours of playtime. But even then, the game offers enough content and story that makes it quite a remarkable Spider-Man experience. Or should we say, an amazing Spider-Man experience. So what do you think of Marvel's Spider-Man 2? Do you think it's a great follow-up to 2018's Spider-Man game? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video. Also be sure to check out the written version of this review, linked in the description below.